everyone. Thank you very much for coming to my podcast. In this episode, this is actually the part 2 of me talking with Chris and answering questions and mostly about learning English or Japanese. 今回もパート2としまして、お友達のクリスと、主に英語の勉強法や勉強についてのご質問に答えるというエピソードになっております。I hope you enjoy the show. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea and kick back and listen. Here we go. Okay, we're back from our break and this is another episode with Chris answering some questions that I got on Twitter. ツイッターの方々からご質問いただいた質問を今クリスに聞いているシリーズパート2なんですけど
Asking Chris.
Asking Chris.
That's nice.
Let's ask Chris 先生で、今回はやっぱりね、英語学習者の方が多いので英語に関する、ご質問をいただいているので、そのご質問をしていきたいと思います。ではですね、最初の質問どうしようかな。どんな人が、ケイタさんからもいただいたし、あともう一人いらっしゃったんですよね。ジミーさんだったかな。どんな人がね、日本人のどういう人たちが英語を学びやすいか、英語を取得しやすいかということなんですけれども、what are the characteristics of Japanese people who can easily improve their English skill? どういう特徴が
I think the Japanese people who learn English the easiest are the ones who aren't afraid. First of all, the ones who aren't afraid to make mistakes.
そこ多分一番だと思いますね、私もね。あんまり間違い気にしすぎると喋れないっていうのは絶対そうだと思うので。完璧主義 not perfectionist 完璧を目指さない。
Well, I think you can be a perfectionist, but you have to realize that perfection comes from removing the imperfections.
そうね。
So I'll give you an example. At my first job in Japan, I was working at a high school, and for almost 2 years, nobody aside from the English teachers would speak to me.
他の先生たちが
They wouldn't speak to me because they were worried about their level of English. They didn't want to be embarrassed about bringing out their level of English, and they were worried about me being embarrassed when it came to speaking Japanese.
もったいないね。
Yeah. So it's like, if they weren't worried about my Japanese level, we could have spoken. If they weren't worried about their English level, we could have spoken.
You miss all these opportunities of getting to know each other. ね。
Now, granted, maybe I should have also been like, "Hey, come talk to me."
話してって。
Well, I was still learning at that point.
Right.
So, I wasn't like, if someone could start a conversation with me, I wouldn't mind, trying out my terrible Japanese at that point. But I didn't, aside from basic greetings, I didn't know what else to say either. So I could have been more proactive with that as well.
Right.
But when you're not afraid to make mistakes, making mistakes isn't a problem for you. So being embarrassed about whatever level you're at, it's like, whatever level, it doesn't matter, because I'm working my way towards a different level.
Without making mistakes, you cannot improve.
You can't.
At all. ね、間違いを犯さない限りは本当に学べないので、その気持ちもわかるけど、やっぱりね、そこら辺はもうね、当たって砕けろっていう感じでやった方がいいのかなっていうふうに感じますよね。That was for one. What are the other things that you think is characteristics of people who can improve English easier?
I think
faster.
The people who look at English and just language in general as a communication tool, as a bridge, as opposed to looking at it as this thing that they have to learn for some exterior purpose, like I have to learn it for work, or I have to learn it because somebody on my job needs it. If you look at it as, if you have genuine interest in English, or any foreign language, you're going to learn it much easier than you would if you're doing it just because you have to.
本当ね、そうですよね。やっぱりこうツールとしてコミュニケーションのツールとして理解しながらやっていくっていうのが、楽しく進めていくっていうのは、楽しくするのが一番かな。
If you like English, you're gonna learn it easier.
そう何でも好きこそものの上手なれっていうので、そういうところがやっぱそうなのかもしれませんよね。英語に関する質問がもう少し来てたんですけど、発音に関して、なんですけど、日本人の発音はネイティブにとって聞き取りづらいと聞きます。ネイティブ並みの発音を取得するのは大変難しいので、初心者とか初級者の方々はどのようなところに気をつけて会話すれば聞き取りやすいかということを、ノブ57歳からの英語学習さんからいただいたんですけど、In terms of pronunciation, he's heard that the Japanese pronunciation is especially more difficult to understand for native English speakers.
Yes.
And it's really hard to gain that pronunciation right.
Yes.
I mean, for especially the beginner level of English learners. So, do you have any advice on that?
Well, I feel like the native, or not the native, the English learners that you're speaking about are the kinds of people who they went through the Japanese system of English teaching, throughout their school days, which means they, maybe from first grade until sixth grade, they were learning, useful words and lots of vocabulary and things like that, and everything was fun. And then from 7th grade until 12th grade, it was, I'm doing this because I have to, and there's a test, and it stops being fun. And that entire time you're surrounded by the Japanese way of learning English, which means taking these foreign sounds and translating them into something that a Japanese ear can understand. And so you get the Japanese pronunciation of a lot of these English words and sentences without the recognition that these sounds that make these words in a different language are completely different than Japanese sounds. And so I think if you want to improve your pronunciation in general, you have to start with the idea that these sounds are completely different. It's not. So for example, like I have students where we say the word I, like watashi, I. And if normally you can put that by itself and they'll just say I. But if you put it in a sentence like, I want to eat cake, they start with, I. And it's like, no, where, what happened? Not I, no. That's, So I think when you start with the idea that these sounds are completely different and stop trying to make them Japanese sounds, stop trying to make them recognizable to, the Japanese lexicon, then you can go about just instead copying the sound, looking for it to sound different and then copying the difference. So I is just I. I know in my head I want to think I-E and there's two syllables, but no, it's just I. And the letter T is not tu or to, it's just t. That's the sound. I know in my head that, in Japanese, every consonant is followed by a vowel, so there's an extra sound on everything, but nope, this T, it's just t.
カタカナではないのでね。そうですよね。クリスさんはもうずっとね、その英語を教えて長いので日本の教育っていうのが分かってると思うんですけど、だから小学校の時代っていうのは楽しく、ゲームと通じてとかいろんな使えるフレーズとか単語とか学んで楽しく学んできたのに、やっぱり中学校とか高校になると受験のための英語ということで面白くなくなっちゃうっていうのをみんなやっぱりね、日本人の人はそこを通ってきたわけで、そして受験が終わると終わった、英語の勉強終わったっていうことで、そこでやっぱり 大人になってから始める英語っていうのはやっぱそこまでのブランクがあって、その受験を終えた時のそのね面白くない英語っていうのに慣れてしまったりとかで、それでカタカナ英語の方のちょっと音の方が浸透してきてしまっている方もいらっしゃるかもしれないので、もう英語の音っていうのは日本語と全然違うんだっていうそこをちょっと知るっていうことも大事かなということですよね。だから単語の音とか、愛だったりとか、individual like word, they may be able to pronounce it right, but when it comes in the sentence, it might be more difficult for them ね。だからその文章高になるとまた発音が難しくなるなと思うので、もう英語は全然違う音なんだっていうことをそこに認識しながら発音の練習していくっていうことをやっぱりYeah, as you can see, we struggle with the pronunciation, especially the sound that the more difficult ones are L and R. And some people actually asked, it's like a never-ending challenge of なんですけど、その質問もあったんですよね。ピクルスさんから、日本語のラ行、ラリルレロという音は R の音に近いのか L の音に近いのか。So the Japanese sound, ラリルレロ, is it similar to R or L?
The answer to that question is yes. Yes, it is similar to R and similar to L.
You cannot say more similar to?
Not really. It's a combination of both.
Combination of both なんだ。
Now, granted, to my ears, it sounds a little bit closer to the L side. So a lot of it depends on the word, but a lot of times if I hear an English word pronounced in Japanese that has an rariru, I would immediately replace that with an L. So, for example, I have a friend whose name is Dari.
Dari?
Dari, yep.
How do you pronounce her name? Dari?
His name.
His name. Okay, sorry.
No. And so in Japanese, it's Dari. But in my head, if this was American, I would just Lali.
Using L? Lali.
Yep.
Lali.
L-O-L-I or L-O-L-L-I. Lali. Because from my ears, it's closer to L. There are other Westerners for whom it's closer to R. In my, it's a combination of both.
So it depends on the person.
And it depends on the word.
But my name sounds like R, right? Like Rika.
Yeah.
Not Rika.
Yeah.
So
I would say Rika. Because on the other hand, I would look at how your name is spelled. And for me, because it's an R, there is no L. It's not like, oh, Rika. No. That's the Japanese way of saying it. Cool. But in English, your name is R-I-K-A. Rika. But at the same time, for Nadi, like, that in my head sounds very much like an L. For that word. Because in English, there is no Rari.
ないね、そうね。クリスもクリスじゃないもんね、クリスだもんね。
クリス、no, it's
全然違うよね。
Well, I mean, that's, more Japanese pronunciation versus, versus the American English pronunciation. People trying to, instead of saying my name as it is, saying the closest Japanese equivalent to it, instead of learning the actual pronunciation.
確かに。じゃあどっちにも近いということで。
It's like close, but no, but whatever. That's not the hill I'm gonna die on.
難しいよね。逆に違う質問があったんですけど、マチャさんからの質問で、聞き取りにくい日本語、理解が難しい日本語など、逆に日本語に関する質問がしてほしいということだったんですけど、So because you learn Japanese, you speak Japanese too, but what are some Japanese words that difficult for you to listen to or you find difficult?
Japanese words that I find difficult. I don't know that I find any particular Japanese words difficult. one of the advantages of Japanese is that it is very consistent in its sounds. So anytime you see, like in hiragana, the character ka, every time you see it, it's always going to be ka.
Yeah.
There's no k. It's not like you see ka and then it could be like, in English where it would be like k or ka or ko. It's always ka, very consistent. And so because it is very consistent, I feel like the rules for the Japanese language, once you learn them, are easier to use than, for example, in English.
確かにね。
So as far as like words are concerned, I don't think I find anything particularly difficult. I will say that because I would say because I'm a Westerner, I have trouble with keigo and sonkeigo.
もちろん。
Because
I sometimes have trouble with them too.
Well, I feel like my trouble comes from the difference in culture.
はい。
So, in Japanese culture is very stratified as far as culture is concerned. There's always somebody underneath you, and there's always somebody above you, and there's always somebody like way above you, and the way you talk to each of these people is different.
Yeah.
And the respect that you are oftentimes required to show these people is different based on who you're talking to. So the way you talk to, let's say, for example, and I would also say I don't think this is a good thing. This is just how it is. But the way you would talk to, let's say, your butcher, the guy who cuts your meat, is different than the way you would talk to your boss at work. The way you talk to your boss at work is different than how you would talk to, let's say, the prime minister. So each of these people have a different respect level that you're supposed to talk to them with. Me being a Westerner, I don't look at anybody as being that high above me, such that I have to constantly remain in a completely humble state before them. Where I come from, whether they take out your trash or whether they are the leader of your country, they get the same please and thank you that everybody else would get.
そっか、そういうこともあるのか。日本語だけではなくて文化的なことっていう背景があるところが難しいよね、確かにね。
Like if you're where I come from, there's only two kinds of English. You have, the polite speech, which you use with people that you don't know. And you have, more friendly speech that you would use with people you do know.
Only two kinds, maybe?
So, but the respect levels are basically the same. I would say please and thank you to my mother, just like I would say please and thank you to my brother, just like I would say please and thank you to my boss.
Right.
Everybody gets the same level of respect.
So
it's difficult for me to be like the English equivalent of Sonkei would be like, oh, excuse me, sir, could I, it would do me such a great honor if you would, to grace me with, like, bro, you put on your pants the same way I do. You brush your teeth the same way I do.
確かにね、その日本語だとすごいもう本当にいろんなレベルのによっての使い方というか尊敬語敬語をねしっかり本当いろんなレベルがあるから余計に難しい。それ日本人にとっても難しいと思うんですけど。Yeah, that's why maybe the Japanese people who are learning English get confused whenever there's like a honorific form of each sentence just asking a favor. ね、なんかやっぱりこう英語に関しても日本人がそこ悩むところかなと思うけど、日本語よりも英語の方がシンプルではありますよね。
More direct.
でも please つけたから丁寧にはならなかったりするよね。Just saying please wouldn't make it a polite form of like when you are asking something at a restaurant, you would say, can you give me this or give me this please would be not too polite, I heard.
Well, it also depends on your tone.
まあそうね。
So I would say, give me this please. Obviously doesn't sound
Right.
as polite as give me this please.
確かにね。
So making things actually sound like a question. So for example, when you're ordering at a restaurant, instead of saying give me this please, it could be seen as more polite to say may I have this, may I have this, can I have this, that may be seen as more polite, but the idea is the same language you use to be polite with the person who's serving your food is the language you would use, with the person who owns the restaurant.
そうね。
It's the same language.
そうね、やっぱりまあ言葉と文化っていうのはいつも同じくらいにね、一緒に存在してるかなっていうことがあるので、You always have to think about the culture that you're in、when you're learning the language, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it totally connects.
Yes.
ね、ですね、他の質問がゆかさんからの質問で、日本に関するニュースで何を見ているかが知りたい。So this person asking you, like, do you read any news in Japanese or do you listen to any, like, how do you get the news?
I look different places online. There are a couple of more independent news outlets that I follow. I read occasionally. I read newspapers and magazines just to sort of gauge my level of Japanese. Try to see how long it'll take me to read through this entire thing and then to get a picture of exactly what they're saying. But it's more so just for, I guess, exam purposes in my case.
Okay.
I don't get to read a whole lot of Japanese news or watch news. I don't really watch TV anyway.
Right,
So.
そうですよね。大体オンラインでね、見るものが多いですよね。で、リリーさんから、日本人の謙遜や遠慮の行動がアメリカ人にはどのように感じられるのか、ネガティブな印象のポジティブな印象、受け取り方もどちらも知りたいって書いてある。What do you think about the 遠慮? You know 遠慮。遠慮 is like being too modest. Or 謙虚. Do you know 謙虚? It's like the same kind of thing. Like you being really すごいね、風がね。
Car moving and everything.
まあ遠慮も謙虚もまあ似たような感じなんですけど、まあ modesty or humble, like being humble, like those two words are very much related for Japanese people. But what do you think of those kind of things?
To my Western ears, like I understand the concept, but oftentimes because of the culture I was raised in, it just sounds to me like some people just can't take a compliment. And so,
そうね。
so you'll say like, for example, someone will cook something like, "Oh, it's delicious," and they're like, "Oh no, no, it was. I just told you it was delicious. Just say thank you." Or you say like, you might compliment somebody on their outfit, like, "Oh, that looks really cool," and they'll say like, "Oh, this old thing."
Yeah.
Nah.
It happens so much. I mean, like, it was so funny because one of my students the other day, she gave me like a gift, like a Christmas present, and then it was wrapped beautifully and everything. But they're humble about it. So they would say, usually Japanese people, you know that they say like, this is something really nothing, but I hope you like it, or this is something not really fancy, or things like that. They would say that. But this time, for the first time, this person, a Japanese student, she said, これ鼻くそみたいなもんですけど、鼻くそ means booger. This is like a booger, but just I would like you to have it. そんな謙遜な
I gave you snot. I hope you enjoy it.
And I was like, it was my first time to hear this kind of thing. It's like, modest ね、遠慮どころか謙虚どころって way too much.
Maybe she was like joking.
So yeah, I mean like she was joking, of course, but it was so funny. It was beautifully wrapped, and then I opened it up as a really nice cookie with the Santa Claus on top. I mean, like it didn't have any booger or snot or anything like that.
Were you looking for snot?
I checked. I did check. でもまあ英語でもありますよね。There are some expressions like that in English. This is something small. But
It's
not
a
people
small
really.
token of our appreciation.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, but you don't really say that. I mean, you could.
The times I've heard it, people actually meant it. It was
そう
heartfelt, but it wasn't said to be modest. It's like if I could do more, I would have done
that's
more.
your
If I could,
feeling.
yeah.
Honest
So
feeling about it.
like, hey, we really appreciate you doing this. Here's a small token of our appreciation.
That is actually very small.
Yeah. It you know.
It could be.
It could be. But the idea is it's they're not saying it to be humble. They're just saying like, hey, here's something for you.
違うねじゃあね。ちょっと違うんだ日本語の謙遜とは。And then they say that in Japanese, and they use this extravagant,
Massive thing.
Massive thing.
It's
Yes.
super complicated. You know, wonderful. This must have cost you a fortune type thing. Like this is small.
まあそれ
It
で
only
まあある
cost
か
you.
な
It only cost you some man, but this is small. Okay. I think one of my favorite people in Japan. I can't say the person's name, but I remember we had a potluck dinner party and they cooked something. They made a dessert, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And that person was like, "Yes, I know. Thank you." I was like,
weird.
"I like you. You and me are gonna be friends."
Oh, I like that. Oh, yeah.
He's like, yes,
I
I know.
know, I
I'm very
know.
good. It's like, yep.
Very rare.
That's how I feel like, you know. And
Yeah.
granted, I know this person was playing, but I also know that this person
Yeah.
knows how good they
Right,
are.
right.
So it's very refreshing. It's like,
そう
yeah,
ね。
I appreciate you appreciating the compliment.
確かにまあねその状況で違ったりとかその言い方でも違ってくるけどやっぱりこうtoo much の時はちょっとねと思うけどまあ日本語でもねあるし最近でも変わってきたかな日本人の人もI don't think they used to be so humble like back in the days but I think it's changing slowly like more
To be more humble.
no to be less humble
I think that's a good thing.
it is yeah
Like like I know for me, there are certain occasions where like if I did good and somebody says yes, you did good, I don't want to be humble about it. Like yeah, I did that.
yeah
That was awesome.
そうそう
You
そう
know.
そうそうそう
Like if you know back to the food you know concept. It's like when you make something, when you cook something that you're really proud of, and
Yeah, I should
somebody
be proud of
compliments
it,
it,
yeah.
you shouldn't have to be like, oh nah, it's like nah. I made the greatest soup you will ever have in your entire life. I did that.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
it
should
is
be confident
delicious.
about it. Yes, so it's always hard for me to teach the students on the like how to compliment in English because they always say no. Oh, I like your shoes. Oh no, they're so cheap. They were on sale. They were half off, and you don't have to say all these things. I'm glad you like them, and that's fine. Stop then. But it's so uncomfortable for
I like your
them
shoes.
too.
Yeah, me too. That's why I bought them. I'm glad you like them.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's the American way of saying
Yeah.
that, right? Yes.
With my friends, I would say like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I bought them. but yeah, it's like, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. But they go on about it because, they feel, I don't know. なんだろう、恥ずかしいのかな
I
照
think
れてるのかな
I feel like I mean, this is another cultural thing, but I think Japanese people are almost, I would say, in certain situations, to a fault, too concerned with embarrassment.
多分照れなんですよね。
It's like,
They get kind of embarrassed.
don't be so embarrassed about this. It's okay. So for example, I mean, fashion's pretty big in Japan.
そうね。
So when you put on a lot of Japanese people, especially those who are very into fashion, they put on clothes knowing full well that they think it looks good. They wouldn't put it on if they didn't think it looked good. You know, maybe it's expensive, maybe it's not, but they put on things knowing that it's supposed to them it looks good. And they go out and they know that people are going to look at this and may even have the same opinion.
Right.
So if you know it looks good to you and you know it probably looks good to other people, when somebody else says, that looks good, why do you, nah, it doesn't, this whole thing, no, you put it on because it looked good. Just say thank you. There's nothing embarrassing about it. If you were going to be embarrassed, why'd you put on the clothes? Like put on an empty rice sack and then be like, oh, this whole thing, and then that would be true. You put on those high heels, you put on those shoes,
You
put
don't
on
say that to them.
pants. What?
What do you don't exactly say that back to them, right? Like, what do you
When
say
somebody says,
yeah.
I look good?
No, I mean like they
Thank you. That's what I say.
No, I mean like when those people you say like, oh, that looks nice, and then they say, no, this doesn't look nice. I mean, what would you say to a reply to that?
It depends on who I'm talking.
Okay.
Like in like the real response would be like, no, it really looks good. In my head, it'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you even saying that? You knew what you put on.
まあ面白いけど
Come
そうですよね。
on. You knew what you put on. You knew why you put it on. You put it on because you knew people were going to look at you and be like, that looks cool.
That's
So
how we
just
are.
soak it up. Enjoy it. You did good.
ということです。あんまりね謙遜をしすぎてもねこういうことになるので、褒められたらね素直にありがとうって言ったりとか。Or just say like if some people say, oh, your Japanese is very good って言われたらなんて言うの
No, for me? Thank you.
ああそんだけ
I'll say thank you. Sometimes I'll say like I still have a lot to learn because admittedly
まだまだですっていう感じだよね
people tell me my Japanese is good, and admittedly I can do like everyday like nichijou kaiwa made dekiru, but I have friends that studied Japanese in college and in winter immersion schools and in high school and things like that. They've passed like the JLPT N1, like the Nihongo no Noryoku Shiken.
難しいやつね
So they've passed that. So me compared to them, it's like, nah, my Japanese is terrible. But normally, because I did work hard to get to this point.
To get where you are.
So normally I just say, thank you. I appreciate that.
それいいですよねだってよくやっぱりこう英語上手ですねって言われていやいやもう全然って言ったりとかみんなねやっぱしちゃうやっぱ恥ずかしいとかやっぱ謙遜もあるのかな
Yep, just say thank you.
ねありがとうございます頑張りますっていう感じがいいかもねもう一つタカピバラさんからで、日本とアメリカあるいは日本語と英語で文化の差や考え方の溝などを感じたことがあればお願いしたいということなんですけど、まあちょっとね今までも話してきたけど We did talk about the differences in terms of culture in Japan and America. Do you have anything else to add on the
Differences in culture
or understanding?
Well, once again, this isn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the context. But so in Japanese culture, solidarity is very, very important. Being part of the group, nobody sticking out, here or there, everybody pushing the group forward is a very important concept. And that can be a good thing in that it means the group is more likely to advance together. So, a nice phrase is the rising tide lifts all ships. So if the group is together, the group puts forth the effort, that's the rising tide. Everybody rises because of that. And that can be good. Where that can be bad is the expectations. So a great example is teachers in Japan. They're scheduled to work, let's say, from 8:05 until 4:30, but nobody leaves at 4:30 because everybody wants to look like they're doing more work. So nobody leaves at 4:30. If you leave at 4:30, you're not being a team player. If you're not doing this overtime work, you're not being a team player. You're not being part of the group. And so it can be a good thing when the group advances, but it can also be a bad thing because it can be a restriction on your own, what you want to do with the time that you're supposed to have. In America, individual freedom, individuality specifically is seen as more important than group solidarity. So for example, if I have an idea that I feel like can advance, myself or the group, I feel comfortable putting that idea forward, and that means that perhaps I will get credit for it and that I will personally advance, even if the group, that I'm in may not advance. So maybe I'm working on a project with some, group members. If I have the idea, the group will finish, but because of my idea, I get credit for it, so I might get, a higher position. So that individuality is important. And it can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing, though, because in America, that individuality also means that I don't care as much for the group. So even if I can do well, oftentimes at the cost of everybody else doing well. So, like in America, there's lots of stories about different companies and CEOs, for example, who have lots and lots of money, but their employees don't make really anything. It's like these, company owners, for example, like Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he has enough money to take care of all of his employees. He's got billions and billions of dollars, but his employees don't make a lot of money. And that I feel like is okay because not okay. It is because of the individualist culture that America specifically has cultivated. Even if it costs somebody else, you can still succeed, and that's just part of the game, so to speak.
That's the thing that's been talked about for a very long time about that. I mean, like having the harmony itself. I mean, in Japan, it's good and bad, I think. And as you said, Japanese people are so used to like having the group and then having this really harmony because of, I've heard that back in the days where everybody was a farmer and they couldn't do the job alone, so they have to have a harmony and they have to work together to achieve certain goals, and that's what I heard. And then at the same time, if you stick out, it's like a nail that's sticking out gets hammered down. That's the thing in Japan, right? So, and then so you have to kind of like blend in the group to not get too, I don't know, stick out. I guess.
You gotta blend in, you gotta be part of the group.
そうっていうのはよく聞きますよね。だから日本はなんか農耕民族だったので、そういう集団での仕事っていうことをずっとね、人に迷惑をかけちゃいけないということで、あまりこう目立たずにみんなと一緒に頑張りましょう的なことがね、まあそれは本当に良かったり悪かったりどっちがいいのかわからないけど、まあアメリカとはそこは違うことなのかなって思いますよね。I think we've answered pretty much all the questions that I got so far. だと思います。結構いっぱいお話ししましたね。
It's fun.
ね、またぜひぜひまたこういうのを企画して、まあいろんなゲストの方とお話ししていきたいなと思うので、It's still very windy outside.
Yep.
はい、年の瀬ですけれども、Good thing weそうなんか車がひっくり返りそうな強風が今日は吹いてて、今日はね12月30日なのでもう年の瀬も年の瀬なんですけど、宮崎県延岡市の北の方のビーチに来てまして、すごい綺麗な景色は見えるけどめちゃくちゃ風が強いので外に出れないですね。
I'm not going outside.
That's a good idea.
I don't mind being cold, but that's a little much.
そうそうそう。今日はクリスさん半袖じゃないんですね。今日はセーターを着てる。
でもスウェットのこれだけ。
中はランニングランニングというかそれコートないのね。
No coat. It's not so bad.
そうなんだ。
I mean, I wouldn't want to stand outside for an hour, but
そうそう。クリスさんとはねずっとお友達でいいお友達でね、さっきねインド料理食べてきたね。
はい、美味しかったね。
美味しかったね。
そのトマトスープは。
トマトスープ、そうカレー食べないでトマトスープ食べた。ね。そんなに
なんかそんなについてないから、なんかトマトスープとガーリックなんだ。
でもう十分に美味しかったよね。私はカレーを食べたけどね。Okay, we will be doing this again. So, I guess that's it for today. Have a happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yes, okay.
Ask me more questions.
Yeah, please do.
It's fun.
また話すので聞いてください。Bye for now.
See you later.